Ms. Soumya Ishwaran, European Ambassador, Global Adjustments Foundation. Soumya Ishwaran has worked in the energy management sector for over 28 years. She started her career in India in a family business and followed with over 21 years in General Electric and 3 years in ABB in the US and Europe. She has led complex teams in matrix organizations to deliver results across functions and geographies in growing roles of responsibility from local, regional to the past 12 years in global roles. With a master's in electrical engineering from the US, significant time in GE with Six Sigma lean early on her career and a passion for new technologies. Ms. Meena Ganesh, CEO and MD, Portia Medical. Meena is one of India's foremost business leaders and most successful entrepreneurs with nearly 3 decades of experience in industries including healthcare, consulting, technology, outsourcing, education and e-commerce. She is CEO of Portia Medical, India's largest and fastest growing home healthcare company, which she founded in July 2013. Meena is leading the charge as the company expands to 50 cities over the next 2 years, providing affordable and convenient healthcare solutions. Ms. Arati Mohan, co-founder and partner, Sattva Consulting. She heads the research, advisory and programs practice at Sattva. She has over 12 plus years of experience spanning consulting, research, content creation and business leadership at Sattva. Arati has led the creation of several flagship research and knowledge reports and multiple engagements curating knowledge exchanges in the sector, bringing together funders, philanthropists, foundations and non-profits. Arati supports the government advisory engagements that Sattva executes in multiple states in India on critical programs. Ms. Nilufer, an exponent in Advaita, Vedanta and TEDx speaker. Nilufer is an exponent of Vedanta, Vedic chanting and Sanskrit and has spent over 2 decades teaching. Nilufer ji explains the intricate subject of non-dualism, Advaita, Vedanta in a simple yet powerfully logical manner. Her teaching methodology follows the tradition set by Adi Shankara and his lineage of gurus, thus enabling her disciples to appreciate the truth about one's existence. Nilufer ji has travelled across the globe teaching Vedanta and allied Vedic texts in Australia, Singapore, Malaysia, Dubai, New Zealand, Europe and the United States of America.
Welcome Meena Ganesh, Nilufer and Arati Mohan to this panel. The topic of the panel is silver linings, and I'm going to start off with a quick perspective on the topic myself, and then I'm going to hand it off to each of you for a couple of minutes to give your perspective on the topic before we move on to further questions. So the topic particularly resonates with me because I was diagnosed with cancer in 2017 and went through a very exhaustive, intensive 9 months of treatment. And throughout that 9 months, I had to keep seeking the silver lining and to stay positive and have the high energy levels. So really look for what's after this. And I draw parallels to this COVID times where for prolonged periods of time, people have gone through different kinds of hardships. And it's so important to seek the silver lining, to keep looking for that. And that makes all the difference between whether you come out of a prolonged hardship with growth or you come out with stress. So for me, it's been an experience where I've come out with growth through my 2018 treatment. And that made me better prepared for the different hardships and everything we've gone through in 2019-20 with COVID. So that's my perspective. Now let me move on to Meena Ganesh. Can you give us your perspective on the theme?
Yes, it's a very important lens at which we need to look at whatever is going on around us. It's very easy to get pulled down by all the challenges, but there are indeed a lot of silver linings. And for a moment, I'll just reflect on what we went through at Portia during this period, because healthcare, certain forms of healthcare were obviously impacted. For instance, anything that was elective completely went out of the window because hospitals were so busy trying to manage the epidemic or the pandemic. But what it meant for us is that we are an outside of hospital or a home healthcare company. It meant that the certain other aspects of what we do became very important. A lot of patients could not go out. They needed help at home. especially the elders. So there has been a lot of requirement for that came in. The other thing was that in the Indian healthcare ecosystem, there is primacy given to facility-based care. But what happened was that at the start of the pandemic, around April, May, early May, we started to talk to some of the governments to say that, listen, all the people that are COVID positive don't necessarily have to go into a facility. The plan at that point was to create very large football-sized facility, and anybody who was infected would be kept there and monitored. But we said that 85 to 90% of people are completely asymptomatic or have very mild symptoms. And really, why do we need to invest in creating these kinds of infrastructure? Instead, we went back to them with a plan of keeping these patients at home, monitoring them with the help of our healthcare workers and doctors who could provide them with teleconsultations. And thereafter, if any of them showed worsening of symptoms, we worked with the local governance to move them to a hospital. Now, this actually took wings, and we started with the Delhi government. We'd worked with the GCC quite extensively, by the way, as well as 5 other states. And nearly 400,000 COVID positive patients were managed by us in this process. And hardly 2.5% of them had to be hospitalized. Now, while this was something that we helped during COVID, what has happened as a result is that it has changed the perception towards non-hospital care. Suddenly, people and the regulators and the government have started to believe that there is an alternative, or there is an additional piece to the ecosystem that they have been missing out all this while. So from a business perspective, that's certainly a silver lining that I observed.
Aarti, could we have your perspective on the theme?
Absolutely. Had a fairly similar but very complementary experience to what Meena described. As an organization at Sattva, we work to support social impact on the ground by working with philanthropies, by working with social impact programs and nonprofits, by working with corporates and their CSR. And while the impact of the pandemic was of very large proportions across the board on health, it was equally large on the aspect of work itself and the aspect of the entire workforce that bore the brunt of not having enough money, finding themselves out of jobs, or their business going through a huge, the micro entrepreneurs and the small entrepreneurs going through a huge downturn on well-being of people, the migrating population seeing a very large outsized impact. This was the disaster within the disaster that we were at the center of and supporting, and we could see how much of a toll it took, and how much it also pushed us back in terms of what the kind of progress in inclusive development that we've already made. So the backdrop is in the light of many systemic things that we're already working on, which got worsened due to COVID. But in terms of silver lining, we did see during this time women, particularly in their work, playing a lot more of a stronger role. 85% of the health workforce of the country is women, and they were battling this pandemic right up at the front lines. The health workers in the hospitals, the ASHA workers, the Anganwadi workers and nurses across the country who were putting their healthcare at risk and combating this and supporting the country to mount such an effective response to the COVID pandemic. I think that's a great silver lining. And how do we support this going forward? 2 is, I think women in their communities have stepped up to be able to service their local communities with food, like so many kitchens and that local kitchens that came up to look at food in the villages, and women producing this, getting together, self-help groups coming together to say, how do we help in counseling at the local level? In Delhi, we were working on a program where we were looking at 3,000, 4,000 calls that were being fielded by the ministry, where people that were calling to say, how do I look at symptoms? How I need a hospital and so on. And in Delhi, through the help of an organization called She Rose, we brought in overnight 900 volunteers, women, who all said, I'm going to call up these, I'm going to feel these calls, respond and bring it back. So these are silver linings where we realize that women at every level could pitch in, whether entrepreneurially or in their work. And I think that's something that we should build upon. On the point of flexibility, home-based work and flexible work for women has always been at the foundation of how we can enable them to look at work and entrepreneurship. And home-based work today in the villages across the country has become very, very critical and important. And so has it provided an agency to urban women through digital. It also has brought about questions of privacy, of safety online, and other things that we have to field and tackle. So the opportunity, I believe, needs to be looked at in a balanced way with what can we provide as agency to be able to facilitate that opportunity. With that, I'll pause to look at further questions.
Nilofer, from your perspective, the philosophical perspective, what is your view on the theme of silver linings?
What lies behind you and what lies before you are tiny matters compared to what lies within you. And I remember when I started reading, that is the first sentence I read with my own little putting alphabets together. I never understood it for a long time, but I kept reading it for years and years. In fact, I still have it because I chose to keep it with me. And through all the events and experiences, somehow that quote seems to be at the back of one's mind, because it doesn't matter what happens before you or what you've left behind. We have a very unique faculty to process and make the best of what is. And that's what I call the silver lining. Our minds are capable of looking at something shining behind all that is dark. So that has always been part of me. And therefore the pandemic was, of course, for personally, it was the best time just to stop and study and grow and spend that time in all the research that you have to do literally in a cave. So in the olden days, the ancient sages, the wise men went into caves. I found this a perfect cave. So I made the best of it because nobody calls you, nobody disturbs you. Everybody's so busy doing their own thing, struggling. And this was a cave. So I think that was the most joyous part personally for me. But then I also realized a lot of people needed help, and they were in touch to manage the psychological impact. So there I'd like to quote something that's very beautiful that said in a universal scripture, which is the Gita, Bhagavad Gita. And it says, one of the things it says is, Bahyan Sparshan Bahi Kritva. We have the capacity to keep Bahyan Sparshan, external things, you can keep them outside. The pandemic is an external situation. Why is it creating a pandemic in our minds? So we have the capacity to take it in or to leave it there and do what best we can. So that seemed to be a very useful tool for a lot of people. Yes, it exists, but it need not exist in me. And so again, if you look at the situation, there are two ways to look at it. If there is a storm, you can suppose that this storm is going to cause havoc, or you can look at the same storm as a way to clean up the place. And I think this pandemic has done that because it's got people to visualize and think of new ways of working, new ways of living, new ways of communicating, new ways of recreating themselves, new ways of processing their own thoughts, because it's given people so much time just to be with themselves. So how do I process the chatter in my own mind? And then they realize I don't have just physical health problems. I have mental issues which I have to handle my physical problems. So they are literally, the pandemic has been a mirror for everyone. And there in that mirror, you can look at yourself and frown, or you can look at yourself and say, no matter what I am, I'm going to make the best of it, and smile at yourself and just continue. So I would look at it as one of the many events that we need, that makes us pause and change our paradigm of thinking, working, just being. I would look at it like that.
Thank you. Very interesting perspectives from each of you. I'd like to now move on to some questions that we have. First one, I will go with Aarti. With entrepreneurial opportunities available for women, with more opportunities now, can you suggest 3 sectors which have the biggest opportunities, particularly in social entrepreneurship post-pandemic?
I just want to talk a little bit about what is the segment we are looking at, right? Like out of the productive workforce, women make half of that workforce in the country. And 65% of that workforce is in the informal economy. Right from working in, in food or food processing outside of agriculture, of course, right? Like, and on lands, working in food processing, in healthcare, in the hospitality and the care and wellness industry. And I think all of these are poised to grow. But the data in front of us is that over the last decade, women have actually dropped out of the workforce more than joined. We are therefore at a 20% overall women working out of the number of women that can actually work. So I do believe that post-pandemic, there is an opportunity, like Nilofer said so beautifully, to be able to correct the things that have already existed and start over a new leaf. How do we have this entire 50% of the productive workforce come back to work? How do we enable that? So I do believe that one, in healthcare and wellness, so many different opportunities have opened up for women to contribute as entrepreneurs and as people working for somebody else. And we did a research a little while ago with 35,000 youth across the country to examine the landscape of skills and where the jobs are post-COVID. Healthcare itself has 27 new job roles that have opened up in terms of where women can contribute. So healthcare and wellness is definitely one. 2 is the entire gamut of digital and mobile internet commerce, internet services, right? Can a woman in Kutch, Gujarat make a dupatta that can then be sold to the urban, woman here? And can that be facilitated by an Amazon or a Flipkart? Can women counselors, facilitated by platforms like Kotia, be able to counsel, people that require healthcare and cannot yet go to the hospital? And that's going to continue to grow. So that's a second kind of opportunity is really is internet and mobile commerce across the value chain. And we should definitely encourage this. And the third is in food and food processing itself. Right from nutritious food for the thousands of children that don't have access to midday meals in the villages, to then saying healthy food, how do we look at our health and how do we cater to an increasingly health conscious urban population? I think these are the 3 areas, and it opens up a gamut of opportunities for women in social enterprise. And the biggest piece here is women that can unlock entrepreneurial opportunities and jobs for women and men across the country. So I think that's whichever segment they are, agriculture or food or internet in e-commerce, how can we enable women to create more jobs and have more people as part of the workforce?
Thank you. Women are seen as natural entrepreneurs, so with a sense of creativity, a thrifty nature, perseverance in face of difficulties, etc. But why do we see not as many, or we see fewer women going into entrepreneurial career options? Why is that? I put that to Meena.
Yes, this is a very appropriate question. And if you look at the metrics, probably less than 10% of the current startup cohort that you look at led by women entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And then I'm talking about the more visible or the more organized part of the startup ecosystem. That doesn't mean that women are not entrepreneurial. That's the interesting part, especially if you look in the rural sector, the SHGs, the small micro entrepreneurships, the microfinance that is absorbed is predominantly by women, and they do an excellent job. They are the best as far as returning the debt that is given to them. They are best in terms of repayment. And even if you see the home-based entrepreneurship, there are lots of women who have got different kinds of YouTube channels selling this or that, or from home baking and so on. But what happens after that is that when it comes to getting into the quote-unquote formal entrepreneurial ecosystem, there seems to be some block which is preventing them from taking the step of being able to organize themselves, perhaps absorb some investments, be able to attract good talent, and then scale the business. So where are the challenges? I believe there are 2 or 3 different aspects of these challenges. The first one is what is within ourselves. That is first thing to overcome. A lot of women still feel that while careers are important, careers are now becoming a part of it's sort of given. Most women assume that they will be building some kind of a career. For what duration, one doesn't know, but at least they go in thinking that career is something that they should aspire for. But along with that career aspiration is a sense of stability that people are looking for, which is extremely unlikely to happen in a startup environment. It is the most destabilizing, the highest, a roller coaster ride, which gives you a huge amount of high, no doubt, but it is not stable in any point of time. You can't consider it a stable ecosystem or stable situation. Now, that itself puts a lot of women off. They worry about it. The families don't particularly support that. They say that, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to take a risk? Why do you want to disrupt your life? Why do you want to create a situation where your ability to then, and especially for young women, for you to settle down into a work life and home life, it's very difficult. But I would say that this is something which we are doing a lot of injustice. This is it harks back to the time when women were told that, yeah, you should study because you're academically inclined, but why do you want a career? Your husband will take care of you. I think we need to move the same dialogue over here and say, okay, some women really want to be entrepreneurs. We need to encourage them because they can bring a lot of value to this country, to the economy of this country. Like Aarti said, they become the people who then employ a lot of others, both men and women. New jobs get created. Net new jobs in this country will only get created when there are enough of startups. So first and foremost, the society, the individuals, we need to come out of that shell that women probably should better to stick with careers which are stable rather than get into a startup mode. The second is, how do you provide them with all the support that they need to move on? Because if there are few other women entrepreneurs for them to look up to, for them to learn from, for them to network with, the path is that much more difficult. So you have to provide that little extra, whether it is women-centered funds, whether it is TIE for women, whether it is IIM Bangalore running programs for women entrepreneurships. All of these are ways by which you help women to get all the skills and the networks that they need to be able to actually do this, go on this journey. The third is the investment community, which is predominantly male today. That too needs to change, because unless there is a woman sitting across, the level of confidence, the unconscious biases that might be there, for them to be overcome, you need to have a decent representation of women in the investor community as well. So these are just some of my thoughts. Of course, this itself would take up a long time if we get into more details, but these are just some of my early thoughts on what can be done to improve women participation in entrepreneurship.
Thank you. Today, there's more moving away from extended families to nuclear families, and we find the man and woman going to work. Is this, in your opinion, a move towards a positive trend for women? Is it an advantage for women going forward? Or should there be a reversal in this? What is your opinion, Nilofer?
Advantage woman, yes. Because a woman today is given all access to education, to work opportunities. So there's an avenue to express her wishes, her desires, her skills, the talents have an avenue. And this has paved a way for women to contribute to the society, to the country, to the economy. So advantage, yes. However, there is also a difficulty because just as women are enamored and inspired to venture out of the home and be employed or be an entrepreneur, they have to have access to a support system. And that support system is the elders, the extended family. Now, it is because that support system that she can manage a home as well as work outside. So this is especially true in the Indian context of looking after family. So like they say, behind every successful man is a woman who inspires him. We can also add that behind every successful woman is a man along with a cooperative extended family support system to help her. So instead of looking at a reversal of trends, I think we can move towards a progressive trend where there are people who are sensitive to a greater validation of the capacities of the women, the powers of the women, and their very specific and special nourishing contributions to world progress. So a way to everyone's happiness is to let them shine, let them contribute their skills, and however, give them all the support and the nourishment they need, which is she has to create very strong and good bonds with all the extended family members and the elders so that they equally participate, and then there won't be a strain. So then she doesn't feel that she is letting any aspect of her life down while growing in one aspect. So I would look at it that way.
Okay. Well, I think most of you would have seen this interview with Indra Nui at one point where she says, women don't have it all and we just pretend like we do. When I saw that interview, I wondered, does anyone have it all? So Aarti, what's your perspective on that? Do women have it all or does anyone have it all?
Right. The year of the pandemic has shown us just how much we don't have it all, right? Like women in this year, at least, we cooked more, we took care of our children and parents more, we faced more loss and grief than in many years that we could imagine. It's collectively the whole mental load of caregiving that women bring alongside the professional context that they contribute to blew up completely this year, right? And we know that as a country, women do 5 times more unpaid work than any other country. But in this year of the pandemic, you realize just what is it that women then act as the foundations of. And we bring a very, what you'd call a founder mindset to the work at home, right? Like we don't look at it as tasks that we have to execute. We look at it as we designing, we planning, we executing, and we taking full accountability of that, right? Yeah. It was very interesting to see how this all panned out. And I do think definitely we don't have it all. And definitely it's true that this is an age where we really laud women who are strong in the face of adversity. It's interesting, I was talking to a male, how many men leaders bring up sportsmen as their inspiration, and in the popular management imagination also, there's so many sportsmen as champions and so on. But if we talk to women leaders, they look at the everyday heroes, right? Who have been strong in the face of adversity, who are resilient. Because I feel somewhere there's also no place for vulnerability. That nurturer mindset is not something that, it's what has been with us for generations. It's not something you again want to reinforce, especially when you're competing in a professional world. So yes, we don't have it all, but nobody ever shows that we don't have it all. We just go through that that entire piece and bearing all the load, and it shows up. We don't have it all, but is it worth it? On any day, and twice on Sunday, yes, it is. And the helping women achieve their dreams is it's something that makes sense for business, it makes sense for economies, it makes sense for societies, and all of these have evidence. So giving women the autonomy of choice and supporting that, and making sure that women themselves know that how it is worth it is very critical.
Yeah, I mean, I myself, when I saw that interview, I looked at my peers and colleagues, and for a long time I had this feeling that somehow, because I was a woman, that I didn't have it all, but men could have it all. And then I realized that a lot of my colleagues, and I'm located in Amsterdam, many of them in Spain, etc., even if they had wives who were not working, who were at home, they were not willing to move from that particular town in that country. So they have limitations as well with mobility, etc. So just having a spouse who's not working doesn't immediately mean that you have the support to be and do whatever you want in your career. So what I realized was there's limitations coming into everybody, man or woman, because of their circumstance and family around. And so women to just think that only we can't have it all is also a bit of a victim feeling, I thought. So, but what is your feeling about that, Meena? What do you think?
I think that nobody can have it all. Nobody has it all. And I think it's important to focus on what we have rather than worrying about what that that feeling sad that we don't have it all. And anyway, what does it mean by saying we have it all? So some fundamental philosophical questions about that. What does it even mean? But just coming back to ground earth, there are enough men too who struggle to get their spouses to understand what they do, and provide them the kind of support that they need. They too have to work very hard. And when they go back home, do they get the kind of, from a non-working spouse? I'm just taking that as an example because you brought that up. It's not that they get the support and they get the understanding from their spouses. So it's not that just because you have a non-working spouse, maybe physically you're less taxed, it doesn't that mean that mentally you're being supported and you're feeling good about the situation. And even today, let's take an example of this work from home. Both men and women are working from home. Their children are all over the place. And when I do conference calls with my male colleagues, video calls, and there are a lot of little faces that pop up in the middle of those also. And not that the women have taken away all the children and kept them on the side. And this is for non-working wives. Okay, please note, even in the situation where the male colleague has a non-working wife, the little faces are popping up and they are part of the conversation, and that's perfectly okay. So I don't think we need to debate that. Now, the question is, are we moving forward in the sense of allowing both men and women live a more equitable life, whether it is the male, if it's the men who are going out to work and coming back, are they getting the support and the understanding at home? If both parties are working, both spouses are working, are they getting enough of physical support from each other, understanding from each other about the challenges and about the issues that they face? And mind you, it's not only the load sharing between the spouse, but also with the children. Are the children understanding your physical load and participating? Are they understanding your mental load and supporting you when you go through ups and downs? Even a 5-year-old child can be very supportive when you're going through a tough time. And I guess it's up to us as mothers to bring them up in a manner that they think it's important to support their parents, male or female. So the parents, man and the woman, they need to support them. So that's, I think, the journey that we all need to embark on.
Absolutely, very well put. Now, e-commerce and digital marketing have changed the marketplace and much faster over the last 1 year than one would have anticipated. So for women today to get into that digital domain, are there specific areas, Meena, that you would suggest that they need to get trained on? I mean, you've seen the evolution of your own business and what has accelerated over the last year.
Yeah, it's very interesting that I think the most important thing a woman can do, or anybody can do, male or female, is to have a growth mindset, because things are changing so fast. Before you learn there's something new coming up. And I'm just amazed. I think I have spent so many years, 35 years of career, I have gotten someplace, and I haven't gotten anywhere. There's this new SPAC, there's a NTF, and there's God only knows what all is there. NFT, sorry, non-fungible tokens. And then, of course, the AIML is the story of the past, is something new. So rather than talking about what they need to learn, I think what I would like people to encourage people to think about, constantly looking around and seeing what is going on new. How do I have that mindset so that I can keep learning? And how do I learn at my own time? My company, my professional world is not going to always help me to learn. But if I have to stay up with whatever is going on, and I have to remain relevant in this extraordinarily fast-paced changing world, especially on the technology front, what am I doing to track and to invest in myself? that would be my advice to people.
Right. And Aarti, what about you with what you're seeing in the space that you're in? Where would you suggest that women can retool and reskill for the future? I mean, as Meena was saying, reinventing yourself constantly, that's going to be a requirement for everybody going forward. I mean, technology is changing every day. How do you bring technology into whatever you're doing, whichever sector you're in, et cetera? I'm in a sector in the electricity business, which is very, very old. We have hardware that's 25, 30 years old. But we're really looking at bringing software with that hardware, and then how do we take it into the future? So where would you say that women should focus on as a first step, with, of course, the understanding that you need to constantly reinvent yourself?
I completely echo what Meena's saying about the transferable skills when it comes to the future of work. We don't know what is going to come up, and what is going to come up is rapidly changing. So how do we learn to learn more effectively, and how do we do that and find our own time to do that is definitely something that I would echo. There are women that are able to enter into the digital fold for the first time. They, from not owning a cell phone, not being part of the internet world as well, but to discovering it. And I think there, the fundamentals of digital literacy, financial literacy is very critical so that they can navigate these pathways that are definitely going to be uncertain, and these could be foundational skills. And two is finding a way to keep that learning, which is lifelong and ongoing. How do we have more of these bite-sized nuggets of learning that then come together as a community on a very frequent basis, than looking at it as chunks of learning that perhaps there may not be enough time to devote. So right. Those are my thoughts on what we could enable as digital skills.
I mean, we're talking about entrepreneurship, and a lot of times entrepreneurship is seen as a second career option by women a few years after they've had a corporate career, etc. But the demands of entrepreneurship are 24 hours. I mean, there's no finishing your office and then going off into home time, etc. So with all that, the stress levels being higher, is that the right time to go into entrepreneurship? Is that a time where a person is likely to be successful? What's your opinion on that?
So just my own story, I started my first startup, Customer Asset, in the year 2000 when my son was about 6 or 8 months old. So right time, it's what is in your head. And what I started was probably one of the most physically taxing businesses, because it was a BPO business which works 24/7. And right. You're starting something like that completely from ground zero in an industry where nobody knows anything about BPOs. It was one of the first BPOs. As a leader, you have to be there. You have to be physically present. So at some time when we have coffee, I can tell you what my schedule used to be. I don't even remember. I can't imagine how. Now, the point is, of course, back to the fact that there is a family support, which becomes super important to help you go through this. But ultimately, if that's what you want to do, any time is the right time. You need to know that this is something that you absolutely want to do. If that is clear in your mind, then any time is the right time. Whether you're just after college, you've just graduated, and there are a lot of young ladies who are getting into their first startups right there. There are people who are in their 30s, there are people in their 50s. There's no age for startup. The important thing is, are you absolutely clear that you are passionate about it? Are you willing to go through whatever it takes to make it work? Because it is not an easy journey. And are you the right person to do it? That also you need to ask. I mean, is this best brought to life by you, or is it just a flash in the pan idea that you have and perhaps better delivered by somebody else? And so you have to keep all of those considerations.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, Aarti, I'd like your perspective as well. I think I remember reading something about in the UK, more men and women post 50 are they're probably getting laid off from work for some different reasons in terms of not even before COVID, and then starting to get into entrepreneurship at that point. But they do come in with a wealth of knowledge that a younger person probably who doesn't have the same experience. So they have certain, although they're starting later, they have certain advantages that come with that experience. And if they have the determination to do it, then as you said, it doesn't matter what time you're starting or at what point you're starting in life. It's whether you're willing to do what it takes to be successful with that. So sure. And Aarti, what do you think about that?
Right. I think it's not a second career if you pick up entrepreneurship after a job. It's actually like a second baby. Right? Like you're never quite prepared for it, and there is the buck stops with you, and whatever it takes 24/7, you're going to be at it because that's the passion and the accountability that you're going to bring in. So I would say it's a second baby. And I don't think there's any right time. I started when my child was 3 months old, moving from the corporate sector to entrepreneurship, thinking I'm going naively that I'm going to have a little bit more time because I am my boss now, right? I'm going to have a little bit more time with my baby. How wrong I was over then in the last 12 years. It never gets easier. It never gets, you never get like more time. You're just always holding all things in your hand and figuring out how to attain that harmony with what you're doing and give it the passion. But I think a few things that are important. Yeah, everybody can be an entrepreneur, right? But it's very important to ask yourself, can you be that entrepreneur? Do you have that resilience and tenacity to go through to very, very difficult things and difficult things that are different in different times? Right. 2 is support ecosystem. And that is definitely your family and the extended family, but it's also people at work. How do you lean on in the right ways? And not hold that facade of strength and be open to that vulnerability so that we get support. I think that's a very critical piece. And 3, it's not a coincidence that older women and in general older entrepreneurs by data have been more successful because they bring that wealth of experience, also many failures before. So I think it's not a coincidence that the larger portion of women who become entrepreneurs are married and their children have attained a certain age. So it's not like toddlers running around while you're trying to do all of this, which is harder. It's not impossible, but harder. So I would say that not at no right time. Do you have that mindset? Do you have the resilience to do what it takes and actively seek support every step of the way?
Right. I hear a lot about extended family on many of the questions that we've gone through and your inputs, etc. I think one of the things that women have in India is that huge advantage of having an extended family around. And I see with some of us living outside of India, etc., where the extended family is not around, it's a different type of challenge when you want to do this. So that's very interesting. Nilüfer, a question for you. So for physical fitness, and I think this is probably something that more people have gotten into in the last 12 months, being at home, etc. So you go to the gym, work out, and so on. But what can people and corporate leaders, etc., women, consciously do every day, if you will, to keep the mental fitness up at their highest level? Can you give us some tips on what we can do, Nilüfer?
This is like an all-time favorite question. So now, since the topic of physical fitness and regular workouts has come up, the answer to mental fitness mirrors what we do for physical fitness. Now, we use the body and then we allow it to rest. So the muscles need rest time, they recover from the strain, and then they're fit again. Now, when it comes to physical fitness, or rather physical rest, we don't do anything. The body just rests. Mm-hmm. To rest the body, we don't have to do anything. But very paradoxically, to get the mind to rest is a challenge. It's a task. To put it better, it's like a war, which an individual often loses. You can't sleep because your mind is overworking. So you can't do something else. You can't change the mood because the mind is overworking. So why this happens is because the mind is only trained to run at its own pace and on its own agenda. Now, the greater the concentration, the greater the focus that the mind has, the greater the tenacity the mind has, to that extent, the roots should be able to go deeper into rest, the roots of the mind, which means the mind has to be trained to rest. This is the requirement. I mean, when we talk about mental fitness, it's not so much how to make the mind work, because the mind is working anyway. It's a skill of how to make the mind rest. Now, here is a very interesting, small, short story, which I never understood for a long time. which I kept reading in a philosophical book, but I really never understood. I'll tell you the story. You can see if you can make any head or tail out of it. And the story is, there was a yogi. A yogi is a very spiritual master, a sage. He had a mat. He had a chatai. In India we call it chatai. It's the natural mat. It's not made of synthetic material. And he takes the chatai wherever he goes. He takes his mat. When he has work, he rolls the mat out, sits on it, and uses it to eat his food, to sleep, to talk to people. And when his work is over, he takes the mat back, rolls it up, puts it under his arm, and walks to the next place. Again, he takes out his mat, he sits on it, he does his work, again he rolls it back. And after that, full stop, the end. That's the end of the story. So when I read this, I said, is this a story? What kind of a story? What? Yogi and his mat. And the title is The Yogi and His Mat. And nothing is said after that. Now, this story has got very, very deep implications, because that mat, that is his instrument. Our instrument is the mind. So when we unfurl the mind to do work, do we have the skill to roll it back and say, shh, be quiet, just relax, do nothing for some time, just be? Which means the test is, can we use our mind as an instrument rather than the instrument using us? And when the instrument uses us, you lose all control, you lose all say over your instruments, which leads to all kinds of mental depression and, breakdowns and emotional problems. So mental fitness, I would say at this juncture, is to learn how to let the mind cooperate with you. Use it, unfurl it like that mat whenever you need to, roll it back so that it can stay with you and cooperate with whatever you want it to do. I think that is a practical skill. If people recognize that will develop greater focus, greater capacity to work, and most importantly, greater capacity to let go and just be in your own space of relaxation.
As you're explaining that, what comes to mind is, we go to the gym every 24 hours. So it's a recharge or physical fitness every 24 hours. Does mental fitness or mental recharge follow the same 24-hour pattern, and should it? Or is it different for every individual? Sorry.
The mental recharge, nature actually does if you sleep well. If you get a good 7, 8, 9 hours of sleep, depending on the individual. So that happens naturally. However, the mind is so heavy and burdened. The mind is working when you're brushing your teeth, when you're eating, when you're talking, you're multitasking. So that kind of a rushing mind needs space just to be. And that is why a lot of new age meditations have come up just to stay. But sometimes if you're not trained the mind sufficiently, even as the meditation goes on, parallelly, the mind says, I will do exactly what I want. I will run, you continue your meditation. So the skill needs to be developed in terms of really understanding and getting the mind to cooperate with me. So I would say it's not a 24-hour, it's not a cycle. It's a cycle of understanding your own system, like you understand your body. So if one were to say, when should I eat? Eat when you're hungry. Please do not eat when you're not hungry. Please exercise when the muscle is not strained. If it's strained, please listen to your body and don't exercise. Now, same for the mind. Allow it to relax when it's heavy, when it's strained, when it's so fatigued, or when it's feeling low. Get it back to center and then do what you have to do with it. So I would look at it more as observe and ask your own system questions. You will get answers from it.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you. I think that's something that I've always wondered. Does it have to be over a period of time, or you listen to your body and your mind? Okay. We're coming to the last question. So the criteria for professional success, is it different for men and women? Aarti, your perspective on it. We start with you and probably go around in a sentence or two. Is that different?
Shouldn't be, right? Why should it be different?
Exactly.
I think we need to level the playing field. and then look at the same meters of professional success that can apply to men and women. Right? And we come from a company where 50% of our leadership is women at Sattva, and it's both in terms of the accountability, the struggle, the achievement, the load bearing is easy. I don't think it should be, but for that you need to have a level playing field. That is where the effort has to be.
So is the level playing field something that's set by that company's culture? Where I used to work in General Electric, one of the things that I think most people felt was how your advance and success is completely merit and performance based, and that went top down, and that's a culture that we lived in and felt like a level playing field. And I never felt that success was a different definition for my peer depending on the gender. Meena, what is your perspective on that?
Absolutely. It is important that the organization provides an environment where there is a feeling of a level playing field. No bias, which is whether conscious or unconscious. There are no questions asked that will women be okay doing this? Well, ask that individual woman and see if she has an objection to do that particular role or not. So don't make assumptions. But I'll also say that this level playing field, while can be created externally, the individual also has to create it in their own minds. We times don't give ourselves a level playing field, or we say that we have so many constraints. When we start to put those constraints on ourselves, saying that because of gender, because of the family circumstances I come from, or because of whatever experiences I've had in the past, I do not qualify to do ABC, then you're not giving yourself a level playing field, and that's not fair. So first and foremost, I think for every woman to give herself a level playing field is super important.
That's a very good point. If you are in a playing field, a level playing field, internally you need to feel that you want to give yourself that chance as well. So it's both the culture you're in and the way you look at it. Absolutely. Yeah. I think we've got another 5 minutes or so. I'd like to use that to go through some what they call rapid fire sessions. So one word answers, if you will. I'm going to try these questions. Greater appreciation for what since March 2020? Meena Ganesh?
Family.
Nilafur?
Inner space.
Inner space. Aarti?
Balance and the need for everyday balance.
Mm-hmm. If I were a social entrepreneur, I would be focusing on, Aarti, what?
Unlocking women entrepreneurship in the rural economy, most definitely.
Nilafur?
Sorry, could you say the question again?
If I were a social entrepreneur, I would be focusing on this area.
Contributing back, just contributing back in whatever skill I have, whatever potential I have. Yes.
And Meena?
Creating grassroots entrepreneurs.
Okay. If the next question is, have you found your gender to be an advantage or disadvantage in your career so far, Meena?
Great advantage.
Advantage. Good to hear that. Nilafur?
Neither advantage nor disadvantage. It's the same. Yeah.
Interesting. Aarti?
It's an advantage that I'll have to create.
And you found it to be an advantage so far?
Self-created, yes.
Okay, this one probably is going to get the same answer from everyone, but I'll ask it anyway. If I could live anywhere in the world, I would choose to live in, Meena?
Where I am.
Nilafur?
India.
Aarti?
India and Bharat.
Okay. One other question, looking at everything we were talking about, what do you do to de-stress? This is what I do to de-stress. Aarti?
Dance class over weekends, Bharatanatyam classes, that's a huge de-stressor for me. And cooking.
Very nice. Nilafur?
Oh, there are many things. I stare at trees. I look at the sunrise and sunset. A lot of anything to do with nature.
Okay, and you play an imaginary orchestra. I heard about that in your TEDx talk.
Yes, and yes, I also play the piano since I have so much time now. Yes.
All right, and Meena?
Multiple things actually. Well, I picked up meditation a lot, music, back to learning music again.
Okay.
Able to spend lots more time with my son because he's back from college. So all of these are phenomenal stress busters.
Very good, very good. And the silver lining, that's the theme today. Does seeking the silver lining come easily to you, or is it tough?
Right. I'm a very highly incurable optimist. I can only see good in anybody and in circumstances. So for me, it's impossible to find the dark piece. Somebody has to point it out to me.
Okay. Aarti?
The optimist eternally. And I
Okay.
want to do more to enable others to be as positive as well.
Very good. And Nilafur?
An optimist, a sort of, I look at it as a challenge. The silver lining is a challenge. So it's more like a game I play with it. So it's a joy.
Okay, very interesting. Well, I think with that, we're coming to the end of the session, and I want to thank all of you. It's been a very interesting session, and thank you for being here, making the time, and I hope we get to meet in person maybe the next time around in India, or any of you are in Amsterdam should certainly look me up. Thank you very much.
Ms. Sabita Rao, Director, Cerebrus Consultants Private Limited, a management graduate from IIM Calcutta. Sabita is a director and head of the Southern Operations of Cerebrus Consultants. In her career spanning over 30 years, she has worked extensively in line HR and consulting. Sabita is an expert in human resource management and has worked on all areas of HR from strategy to implementation. She has executed HR assignments in India, Sri Lanka, South Africa, Laos, PDR, among others. She has handled a diverse client base ranging from family-managed organizations, multinationals, and bilateral multilateral funding organizations. She has extensive experience in dealing with government PSU clients. Her area of experience in HR include organization restructuring, rewards, learning and development, performance management, change management, and diversity.
It is indeed my privilege to deliver this formal vote of thanks at the MMA Women Managers Convention 2021. Cerebrus Consultants has been the knowledge partner for over a decade. Thank you, MMA. It has indeed been very enriching. This year, the format is virtual and designed to reach a large number of viewers across the world. Our thanks to Kate Sweetman, former editor of the Harvard Business Review, who joined our keynote session, and thanks to other distinguished speakers who shared their perspectives on the conference theme, The New Woman of Today. Thank you, Mr. Ravichandran Purushothaman, President MMA, Managing Committee members, members of the Women Managers Convention Committee. Thank you, Dr. Ranjini Manian, the chairperson. Your enthusiasm is infectious. We thank you for your leadership. Convention sponsors and partners, we owe you a lot. Thank you very much. Congratulations to all participants of the 20th competition for the Outstanding Woman Manager. Our thanks to the judges who evaluated the competition. Audiences all over watching and listening to MMA Radio Live, thank you. Sharanya Modi, thank you for thinking through and writing some of the most insightful pieces for this conference. My sincere thanks to the members of the media for their presence and coverage of the convention. Last but not the least, Group Captain R. Vijay Kumar, you and your team are just superb. Thank you for everything. You are the anchor of this program. Let me end by thanking every one of you. Have a great day, and may the memories linger on.
you.